It's that time of year. The World Junior Championships get underway this weekend. We've got a full preview of it. Who are the top prospects to watch and which team should be the favorite? We've got that and more coming up next.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday and happy Boxing Day to everyone who's celebrating. And welcome to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And thank you for helping to make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. I'm here each and every Friday with Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. And Rachel, I'm excited. It's that time of the year for World Juniors, and also happy Friday to you.
Yeah, happy Friday. And it is the most wonderful time of the year, as I always refer to World Juniors. And the thing that I love about it the most is the mix of existing NHL prospects and draft eligible prospects. And when you mix that together, you get a look at your team's up and coming players and how they match up best on best against their peers, right? And then you also get kind of a sneak peek at some of the draft eligible prospects. And, for me, especially getting a look at some of the European players, this, as a North American viewer, this could be the first time you get a chance to watch some of those European draft eligible prospects.
Yeah, and there's always a difference between watching highlights, which you can find on YouTube, and then watching a complete game or even a complete tournament where you get to see them for 2, 3, 4 games, depending on the player and the team. And also you're more familiar with the players they're competing with and against. So I think that adds a little more knowledge to the picture that you get about how good a prospect is against their peers from around the world.
Yeah. And, I think that there's also the national pride aspect of it. You get to root for your country or not for your country as you see fit there. But, and I think that when you're a fan of a particular NHL team, of course, you want to look at the guys you've already drafted in particular. And, for the most part, they're going to be spread amongst all different teams. So pretty much whatever game you're going to watch, you're going to have some sort of interest there, whether it is your own prospects or a draft eligible prospect.
And I may even take it one other category. If there's a player from your state or your province or your hometown, that adds another dimension where, and that always gets me a little crazy when you have like 2 prospects from your team going up against each other, or 2 players you really like. I get a little bit torn sometimes when that happens.
Yeah. And, for me, this kind of starts ramping up draft coverage for the season and looking at the draft eligible prospects. And it's when I start getting attached to players that the team I cover, the Philadelphia Flyers, will ultimately not draft. And then I'll get mad about it. So that's how this tournament usually works for me.
Yeah, there you go. But and it does sort of whet your appetite for the draft, though. It gets you started. How much of an impact do you think a strong performance at World Juniors can have for a prospect?
Oh, it's huge, especially if it's, somebody that's maybe coming off an injury and hasn't had a chance to play a ton, or if it's a player that's maybe struggled a little bit in their home league. Like some of these guys play in full-blown grown-up leagues, like perhaps the SHL or something in Sweden. They're not, a huge standout player on their team because they're, lower in the lineup there because it's a big pro league, but this is where they get to shine, right? They'll get the ice time, they'll get the minutes. And so I think it can really jumpstart somebody's draft year.
No doubt. And it has an impact really on these players' future lives, if you think about it. I mean, the direction that their hockey career, what city they're going to live in, all of these things, are affected by how they perform. And there is also, as you mentioned, that national pride situation. I mean, it's the World Juniors, it's the Olympics, the World Championships. Those are the big international tournaments, and this is usually the first one that these players can really participate in as they get older.
Yeah, absolutely. Although it is interesting because we have, not one, but two current NHL players that are in this tournament because, they're younger and they just happen to make their NHL squads, but teams have loaned them to their national team, which is Canada, which makes that interesting. Now, Team Canada has struggled the last couple of years. They did not medal the last couple of years. So them getting Michael Misa from the Sharks and Zane Parekh from the Flames, it could make a huge difference for them.
It really could. And it's interesting to see, why an NHL team would decide to loan a player on their roster to the World Juniors. I mean, getting them more ice time, getting them more experience are probably the top two reasons. How much pressure do you think there is on Canada, though, after a couple of years of struggle? I mean, there's a lot of pride in the Canadian program to be one of the best, if not the best in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a huge, huge year for Team Canada for this tournament, like I said, because they've struggled the last couple of years and, they have a reputation here to uphold with hockey being quote unquote Canada's game. But I just don't know. I think this is the best chance they've had. I think they've had some roster construction issues the last couple of years. And, there could be a better chance here. I really like that Carter George is back in net. He was definitely the best goaltender the last time around, I think, despite everything. But, I think with the experience that he has coming back again, that'll be huge for them. I will say, we have Michael Misa and Parekh coming in for Team Canada. Somebody that's not going to be there, the Sabres organization, Consta Helenius, who's playing for the Rochester Americans right now, they said no. So he will not be playing for Team Finland. And that's certainly a blow to that team.
Yeah, Finland could certainly use his help in this tournament. And again, I understand both sides of it as to why teams would or would not want to lend a player for the World Juniors, because you suffer an injury, and Matthew Schaefer, for example, was injured at the World Juniors last year, did not play after that. If your top prospect suffers an injury, that could set them back in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a tough decision, and I certainly get it. I think, one of the other things about this tournament, we mentioned about NHL teams being able to get a look at their already drafted prospects at best on best against their peers. And it gives teams that maybe are struggling this season in the NHL or have struggled for a couple of years who now have a huge number of prospects in their system because they've gotten, a lot of draft assets or they've had high picks. And so for me, if I'm a Nashville Predators fan, this is going to be a gangbusters couple of weeks here, right? Because they have so many top prospects in this tournament on different teams. Ivan Kovic is the backup goaltender in net, so he'll probably see some action there, which is really good. I really love Teddy Stiga and Riker Lee from the National Team Development Program for Team USA. Viggo Gustafsson is a tremendous defenseman on Team Sweden. So Brady Martin is a really quality center. And, we talked about him with the draft last year. So I am very excited if I'm a Predators fan.
Yeah, maybe even more excited than I am about watching my NHL team these days.
Exactly.
So, because the future could be bright. And then, you also have to sort of look toward, they've got to be looking at Gavin McKenna, right? I mean, they're certainly scouting him, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's one of the draft eligible prospects,
Right.
obviously. But yeah, I think there's plenty of other NHL teams with a ton of prospects in the tournament. I mean, Utah's got 7, the Kings, Islanders, Flyers, and Caps have 6. That is huge, and with like 3 metro teams that are, duking it out right now with a ton of prospects in this tournament that could have significant impacts on their team in the next year or two. Like, that's pretty exciting to watch.
It really is, and it is something to look forward to. Look, and it's great hockey too. I mean, forget that. It's just
Yeah.
great hockey in addition to all of that. And for me, it's also kind of cool 5 years later to go back and watch part of these games, because then you sort of know which guys panned out and which didn't, and you see how they looked in those World Juniors tournaments when we didn't know how good they were going to be. So
That is true.
it's always kind of fun. But all right, we have got more to discuss about the World Juniors as they get underway today. Plus, a minor league hockey league is looking at a potential strike. We'll talk about that and some of the biggest games coming up this weekend when the NHL resumes. All that coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you could place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. I love that live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up, and you can bet on things like next touchdown scorer, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. And thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get your favorite team show with no interruptions, members only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer club to learn more.
All right. So, World Juniors starting today, running through the early part of January. What is maybe the biggest thing you've got to look at here at this tournament?
Well, I mean, for me personally, I'm looking at those 6 Flyers prospects that
Yeah.
are in the tournament, right? And the top of those prospects is Porter Martone, who the Flyers drafted with their top pick last year around, and he should be on the top line for Team Canada. And that'll be pretty exciting. He's such a dynamic winger, and he's playing like gangbusters at Michigan State this year so far. So that is something I'm really excited about, as well as a sneaky little player, Heikki Ruohonen on Team Finland. He's their 2C, and he really could be something. He was a 4th round pick that could turn into something really fun there. So I am excited for those 2 guys in particular. But then, of course, like we were just saying, the draft eligible guys are who I'm looking forward to. McKenna is the flashy name there,
Right.
right? But he's gotten some critique, I think, mostly inappropriately. I think, for a kid that young, it's his first year in NCAA, there's going to be an adjustment period, and he's still a tremendous player. He may not go #1, but he's still going to be top 3, I would say, guaranteed. So, we'll see what happens with him. But I think the other 2 players that I'm most interested is Chase Reed, a defenseman He is just such an all-around guy. He can like rack up the points. He's really good with and without the puck. I love him. I think he'll go top 3 as well in this draft. I would say 5 is probably the lowest he could potentially go in this draft. I also like Ivar Stenberg, a forward for Team Sweden. He might go number 2, maybe number 3 at worst, but he's just has like skating is something guys always seem to need to work on who are that young, and his skating is very, very good already. You can always get better, but that's not on the list of things that he really needs to work on. But he's already playing in the SHL. He's leading his team in points, so I am very excited to see him play.
Yeah, it should be interesting to watch those guys. And how about teams? I mean, everyone talks about the US and Canada. Is there a dark horse team maybe that you're looking at besides those two?
I really don't care, to be honest. This is like one of those tournaments I just want good hockey. I
Okay.
don't really care who wins ultimately in the end, but yeah, I'm just looking forward to the battles. I think,
Yeah.
Sweden has a very good team at this tournament in particular if you're looking not USA or Canada. I'm always going to root for Latvia cuz that's fun. But Team Czechia has
Yeah.
got some really good guys as well. So I think it's just going to be a good tournament overall.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it, and always a great time of year. And the all the talk, the scouts, everybody is just so much chatter after this, and it really does start to ramp things up for the draft as well. How about the ECHL? What a mess. This is, for those of you who may not know, the equivalent of a double A hockey league. You have the NHL, the next level down is the AHL, and then you have the ECHL. And yet they may go on strike today, Friday, if they can't reach some kind of an agreement. And boy, would that be disastrous for minor league hockey.
Yeah, it's interesting. So at the NHL level, you have the NHL Players Association as the union that represents those players. The minor league uh, players are represented by a single entity union, the PHPA, that represents AHL and ECHL players, but they negotiate separately.
Yeah.
And it is out there that the deal for the AHL players is pretty close, and they just have to kind of dot I's and cross T's, and it should be taken care of. Both the AHL and the ECHL have been playing without a contract all season long so far, which is not great, I got to say, because you got to have those protections in place, right? And systems in place for all sorts of processes around player contracts and discipline and all of that. So
Player safety and yeah.
player safety, all of those things. And so what's going on with the ECHL contract negotiations is that the HL has come to the table and, promised some salary increases, like 16 point some percent increase for the first year, and then, a cap increase kind of commensurate with the NHL cap increase, but obviously the number isn't as high, right? But the percentage increase could match what the NHL is doing to try and like catch up, right? But a lot of ECHL players have other jobs, right? Because and they have to have other income because it's just not enough to support yourself. And so there has to be protections in place that are somewhat unique to that league. And the players have said, there's some pretty terrible working conditions that we have to solve here, whether it's equipment that's not quite right. Sometimes they're getting used equipment instead of new equipment provided for them. They're having bus ride days count as days off in their schedule, which is not really a day off.
No.
So yeah, they need to kind of button up the player safety and conditions around what they're working on, and that's just as important as salary in a lot of cases, especially because they all have to be able to work other jobs.
Yeah, and some of the things they're asking for, like, we need helmets that fit. I mean, that's
Yeah.
like you would think that if you're running a recreational hockey league for kids, you want to have helmets that fit. You need helmets that fit. That's a safety issue. having used helmets, it's also like a cleanliness issue. I mean, there's a lot of
Well, I don't know that they have getting used helmets, but the padding inside a professional hockey player's helmet is custom to
right.
their head, as opposed to, just like regular generic padding that like a recreational hockey player would have, right? There's a difference there. And so that's when you're saying like a helmet that fits, you need custom padding inside of your helmet to protect your head.
Yes. And these are seemingly very basic things, and hopefully they will work it out, because you don't want to see these players go on strike, and you don't want to see these leagues damaged. You want everyone to have safe working conditions and fair working conditions. So fingers crossed that the ECHL can settle this, and that the AHL will soon finish crossing their T's and dotting their I's and getting these contracts taken care of. We've got more to get to on today's show. Hockey, NHL hockey, will resume on Saturday after the holiday break. A lot of great games this weekend. We're going to talk about that coming up next on today's Locked On NHL podcast. So, Rachel, when everything resumes on Saturday, they're going with a rivalry theme. And there
Yes.
are a lot of rivalry games. We get back underway, 6:00 Eastern time, the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders. That's the first rivalry game. And, this one is always compelling.
I mean, you would know better than I would covering the Islanders. But yeah, absolutely. 13 games on tap, and that is an excellent one to start off with. The Rangers, as we know, have been struggling at home, but can they pull one off against your Islanders?
Yeah, and this is a 4-point game in the standings when you've got these two division rivals. And, right now, a grand total of 2 points separates them. Now, the Islanders have a couple of games in hand, and they're 2 points ahead. But you win this game in regulation, it has a big impact on the standings.
I mean, everything has a huge impact on the standings, given the way the Eastern Conference is. It's really fascinating because the Eastern Conference is so tight, right? And the worst team in the Eastern Conference, the Columbus Blue Jackets, is at 500. But if you look at the West, there's 4 teams that are below 500, right? But the best teams in the West are better than all of the East. It's just it's fascinating how it's been
It
playing
is the
out.
way this is sort of developed. Now, 6:00, you've got the Rangers and the Islanders. 7:00, the Battle of Florida, Tampa Bay
Mhm.
and the Florida Panthers. And that's always an intense matchup. And 1 point separates those two teams.
Yeah, obviously the Battle of Florida is huge every single time, right? And you're looking at a Florida Panthers team that has slowly crawled their way back into a playoff position, almost inexplicably here, but also expectedly. It's just one of these crazy progressions that has happened this season. And, don't look now, but they may actually make a run of it again.
Yeah, exactly. Don't look now, but the Panthers may be gaining on you, I guess. You also have the Battle of Ontario, the Senators and the Maple Leafs. And, the Maple Leafs right now dead last in the Atlantic, but they're a game over NHL 500, just fired an assistant coach, and the dreaded vote of confidence given to the head coach. Can they start righting the ship?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And with Ottawa being a little inconsistent this season, I think both teams have a lot to prove here.
Yep. No question. No question about that. And then you have the Battle of Southern California, the Anaheim Ducks and the LA Kings.
Yeah, that actually should be a really fun one just because there's always a lot of people that travel for those games because it's so close. Much like the Rangers Islanders situation, the crowd gets very mixed and it could be contentious and it's a lot of fun. I've been to Kings versus Ducks games in Orange County and in LA, and it's always a good time. I mean, the Kings fans I think travel a little bit more than the Ducks fans, but still, it is a lot of fun. And with the Ducks playing so well this year,
Yeah.
and the Kings, have struggled a little bit. They are in a wild card position now, but the Ducks are number 2 in the Pacific right now with 5 points separating the two teams. And I think that the Kings have a lot to prove in terms of being the dominant team in Southern California.
And then, of course, we have the famous Battle of Alberta. The Oilers starting to also kind of jump up in the standings lately, and the
Yep.
Flames, who are still struggling.
Yeah, the Flames have had a tough season, but they are 6-4 in their last 10. They lost their last game. It's been a bit of a mixed bag. They're having some issues scoring consistently so far this season. I think they're not tanking per se, but they're not tanking either, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
I would call the Flames like a quiet quitting team. This season where they're gonna try and, like, quietly get one of those, top lottery positions there, but the Oilers are obviously all in, trying to get back to the Stanley Cup final again, and you're right, they've been on quite a run, the last 10 games or so, yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
Now, on Sunday, a couple of games that we wanted to take a look at. Montreal making their annual trip to Florida over the Christmas/New Year's time. And they are visiting the Tampa Bay Lightning in a game where these two teams are literally separated by 2 points in the standings, but Tampa Bay has a game in hand.
Right. Now, Tampa, as we just talked about, will be coming off the game against the Florida Panthers the day before, and that is going to take a lot out of them. We already know that because of how physical that game is likely to be between those two teams. And so to have to play Montreal, which is a team, coming in like gangbusters, they're in a top spot in their division as well, second only to Detroit right now, and they have a lot of dynamic offensive pieces. They can move pretty quickly. And so, for a potentially tired Tampa Bay Lightning team, that is going to be an interesting game to watch. And, you mentioned the annual Montreal trip down to Florida. I have seen those games many, many times, traveling to Florida at the same time of year. I once went to both of their games back to back. They were two days back to back. First in Sunrise and then in Tampa. I made the drive across the swamp for the game the next day. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, it is always a fun little road trip. And, a lot of people from Montreal often go down to Florida to get some sun and some warmth down there and also watch the Canadians play.
Yeah, so that's an important game. And then you have an original six matchup to wrap it up, Toronto in Detroit.
Yeah, I am really intrigued by this particular game because, again, we saw Toronto's playing Ottawa the day before,
Yeah.
right? And I think that Toronto has a lot of reputation on the line here, and they're seen as a team this season that are giving up, and there's just like not a winning attitude in the locker room. And we saw, like you mentioned, with Mark Savard getting fired, Craig Berube is supposedly safe, but that's never a guarantee, right? 2 days later he could get fired. You just don't know.
The rule is if the GM has to say that you're safe, you're not safe.
You are not safe whatsoever. So yeah, it is going to be a very fun couple of days coming off the break. That is for sure.
No doubt about that, and looking forward to it. So yeah, no NHL hockey until Saturday, but can't say it's a dull time for hockey fans. A lot of exciting hockey going on, and that's going to do it for us today. I will be back on Monday interviewing 3 of our local hosts about some of the biggest stories from around the league. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and thank you for watching and listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.